Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Tales of Agmar podcast. I'm your host and creator, Sinjin, and today we will be diving into the story of Klepp, one of the important minor characters in my first book. We'll see, though, if he stays a minor character, though. A little bit more on that later as we explore more about him. But before we get there, let's talk about some announcements. As usual, we've got the Discord and the Ko-fi linked down in the show notes below. That Discord is free for everyone. I get it for free. You should get it for free. It just makes sense in my head. And the big thing, right, is I just want to make it a place where people can interact around the cast, around Tales of Agmar as a whole. And as the years go by with this, we'll grow into more things. Maybe that's where we'll talk about more upcoming projects. You guys could vote on like what projects you want to see in the future. Once I get a little bit more, people working with me and etc. etc. But right for now, or excuse me, for now, right, it's just the book that I'm mainly concerned about and getting everything out that way. So, anyways, that's all the Discord. That's what the Discord's for. The Ko-fi, I'm gonna go a little bit more in depth with it this week because it's been a minute since I've talked about it. Right, it's just a little tip jar. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, if you're excited, and you want to contribute, that's where you can contribute right now. Obviously, once the book gets rolling out, we will also have the book for everyone to purchase. And I'm still working through some stuff with that. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit more about the book in a second. But the Ko-fi is, aside from just being like a tip jar thing, right? The main goal for the Ko-fi is to help get some more art going for Tales of Agmar, some more commissioned work, just to make us look better online. I get some visuals, obviously, perhaps experiment with book covers. We'll kind of see what that looks like in the future. And then the YouTube presence for the Tales of Agmar. Yes, we have a YouTube. Um, right now, it's really just the podcast audio uploaded with a fancy waveform. Looks cool. You can always feel free to go check it out. Or if you are checking us out on YouTube, thanks for checking us out there. But I'm hoping to get that past the just little kind of podcast copy and paste thing and more into a sort of, wouldn't be a PowerPoint presentation, but make them more kind of like if you've seen like the lore channels for different things out there where they've got like the clip arts and like the fan arts and maybe some movie clips, right? We don't have movie clips yet, but hopefully in the future we get those. But making something like that for Tales of Agmar, just so there's a little bit more of a visual guide running with it, right? And if we're lucky too, we could have an Tales of Agmar visual guide in the future as well. But anyways, all right, that's what the Ko-fi. That's that's the Ko-fi's goal. Excuse me. And then obviously on top, excuse me, again of all of that, it just also helps offset the costs of producing this show for y'all. So that's that. Now, for the part I suspect many of you have been waiting for, and that is an update on how the book editing is going. In short, I think it's super well. I just finished my first once over, like my first read of the book, took lots of notes for myself. I've been getting notes back from, the now dubbed alpha readers. And my first impressions, as well as theirs, is that the book is pretty fantastic. It's definitely something that I personally would pick up off of the bookstore/library shelves. And I'm not saying that with the standard like artist bias that can easily happen, right? I'm not just like, oh, my work is just so fantastic because it's me. I'm actually like, no, like this work is good. It's something I'm proud of, and I'm proud of it for a good reason, right? It's actually a good story. All of the alpha readers that have come back so far, each one of them said it's very, very gripping. They feel like the flow is great. The story pulls you along at a good pace, right? It doesn't drag you across the floor, or whiplash you side to side while you're exploring what's going on across Agmar. And that's exciting for me. All right, I was a little bit worried about how some pacing could go and kind of how I chose to tell all of the events that go on during this time period on Agmar and across the universe. But I've been told it's super fantastic. Now, with that said, obviously, with all things, there's notes, right? I've gotten notes about grammar. That's always going to be a thing, working on grammar. Notes about like the beginning. Quite a few of the test readers have been saying like, hey, like, you just need a little bit of a different beginning so that it really just when somebody picks it up, it really grabs them off the page. Because right now, just to explain to all of you kind of how it starts, is we've got a little bit of somewhat of like a Lord of the Rings beginning, but it's obviously not Tolkien beginning Lord of the Rings. That's got a very good beginning to a book. It does pull you in, right? But it's kind of like that pace. And I've been told by some people, especially some authors, that like other author friends or friends of friends who are authors, they're like, right now, a lot of people are looking for like that gripping beginning that kind of grips you in fast. It doesn't like a slow burn grip. And so, working on something there. We'll see that what that looks like. I've experimented with a prologue and I didn't quite like that. And so, as you can probably tell, it's going to slow the project down just a little bit. But I'm hoping to get that done, get that out of the way, and work on other things very soon here. And by other things, I mean other edits to the book. That way, we will hopefully still meet that end of May 2026 deadline. So, very, very exciting news over here. And yeah, that right, end of May 2026. I feel like that's going to be a very good deadline. Um, we'll see well, excuse me, I am going to be releasing the first chapters on a Monday with the same time as a corresponding podcast episode. Perhaps the whole podcast episode will be about kind of the beginning book thing and how you can get there. And then we'll chat about maybe some lore or something in the opening pages. And perhaps not. I might just say, hey, it's there now. This is the lore for the day, and turn you loose, or lore for the week, right? And then turn you guys loose to go and read a couple chapters. I'm going to release a few chapters at the same time. Still the same plan where we kind of end before we get to the full ending. And we'll see how that goes. I'm hesitant to release the full ending just because, right, obviously, I I want to get your guys' feedback so that if for whatever excuse me, that a little bit of the ending needs to change, or I need to like, cover a plot hole in the ending, I want to be able to do that and keep it a surprise for everyone for once they buy the book. Kind of, make it exciting. Now, with that said, obviously, I'm not going to try to charge everyone a super expensive amount for the book. I want to make it at a good price range for like the size of the book, because I feel like that makes sense. Price a book off of its size and everything, especially for a first book. But yeah, anyways, that's all the updates for the book. That's what we're running today. And so before we continue, I do just want to thank everyone that has been following and commenting, as well as sharing the cast with your friends. It's been super helpful. It really helps for anyone that's run a podcast before. You know what it looks like at the beginning. And for those of you who haven't, or maybe, start something else from the beginning, it's pretty crazy doing something from the ground up, especially in today's day and age when there's so many other, kind of giants of industry or of like storytelling and whatnot. And, they've got established things. But I'm happy to be here. I'm really enjoying the little quiet community we got going. I'm a quiet person too, and so I get it. So thank you all for just coming and listening and joining me today. So, and thank you so much for joining us Mondays at 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. And without further ado, sorry, I've been workshopping things. So, anyways, let's talk about our boy Klep. Now, Klep's story is going to be a little bit different than those in Theocracy. If, for some reason, maybe this is the first episode you found, or you're just kind of jumping around and you have not listened to the Theocracy episodes, I would encourage you to go back and listen to them. I think there's two. It was a two-part episode. It's just going to give you a good rundown of what the Theocracy is, kind of what it looks like, a little bit more in-depth than the book is going to go for the first run. And it's going to talk about sort of a day in the life. Well, not sort of, it is. That's what I was doing at that time. We would close out episodes talking about a day in the life of a citizen there. All right, and that's important because Klepp, he's going to look a little bit different. So, if for whatever reason you don't want to go back and listen to those, or you just want to stay here and you'll go back and listen to those later, here's a short little recap on the Theocracy, a little bit what it is, and what life is for the people, and then we'll go dive into Klepp as a minor character. So, thanks to technology that helped them break away from their homelands, a large group of human and forge-born colonists now termed as rebels by their separate governments, have broken away, and they've elected a governing body of 100 leaders, who at this time, this is a couple hundred years ago in the lore, it's like about 200 years ago, within Tales of Agmar lore, um, they're making this government. They've made their own government, kind of American Revolutionary esque vibes going on here. All right, but they've got 100 leaders kind of forming, a senate, for lack of a different term. And then that senate ends up choosing a head, making 101 people, right? And so we've got that tiebreaker in case 50-50 happens, or you need like a strong voice. That's what this 101th person is supposed to do. All right, and then the whole idea of this is to lead them to a brighter, more prosperous future without the need of a monarchy, putting everyone on the same level. The goal is to not really create a noble class per se, or at least to create more of a free market so that everyone can prosper according to how much effort they put in to the community as a whole, right? And the average person in the Theocracy lives a super good life. We chat a little bit more about, well, not chat, but in the book, you'll read a little bit more about some different things between the Theocracy and the Middle Kingdom, as that does get explored a little bit by Kandra. But right here, the average persons, they've got running water. We don't always have running water in the Middle Kingdom. Some of the nobles do, some of them don't. Kind of depends on where they're at. That was explored a little bit in the Middle Kingdom episode, and so feel free to run back and listen to those ones too, if you're interested to learn a little bit more about kind of the technology level, magic in the Middle Kingdom, and well as like living conditions. But right, we've got running water in the Theocracy, we've got indoor plumbing, we've got a melting pot of cultures. The Theocracy is still, or excuse me, the Middle Kingdom is still mainly human, while the Theocracy has slowly just been kind of melting in different cultures. Mainly, you've got human and Forgeborn. They start picking up some Aurelians, and then they, of course, have Terravan there. Everyone's got a mix of Terravan with them that do different things. Now, for their industrial military complex and just the military as a whole, it's mostly run by humans and Forgeborn, especially the industrial complex part. That's mostly the Forgeborn that run that. And then again, that's another thing we go a little bit more depth with during the Theocracy specific episodes. But anyways, aside from all of that, they just have various other things that we would consider to be modern luxuries. Kind of like a better done clothes in the Middle Kingdom. They've got some more, because they're they're like a steampunk, diesel punk transitionary faction. I'm still very much on the steampunk side, though, I would argue. But anyways, Klepp, he's got all that going for him and a little bit more. So, as alluded to in the Theocracy cast, Klepp's family, the Saunters, have ruled the Theocracy since its inception. So since the beginning, right, that 101th person, he was a Saunter and sort of started this Saunter dynasty, for lack of a better term. But no one else has been put in these seats, right? They hold elections, but it's always either nobody's running against the Saunters, it's a few Saunters running against each other, or if someone does run against them, right, they just kind of lose out. Not that the person disappears or anything, because that would be a little too suspicious, but right, like it's just always been the Saunters, and a lot of the citizens accept that because the Saunters they haven't led them wrong yet, right? It's something that's working, which can be a dangerous situation to be in, right? If you keep voting in somebody or a group of people, that could be pretty dangerous. Obviously, they don't know that. They're still experimenting with the idea of democracy, of voting in elected officials and that sort of a thing. So now we've got Klepp. He's in this line of continuously elected in officials, and he's going to be a little bit different, right? His origin, he starts out being just like a normal, I'm not going to call him a noble son because that's not what he is, but more of like the equivalent of a businessman's son, right? He's got lots of dad's money. He's smart. He figures things out. He doesn't just go and like play dumb or anything like that. He does use his resources quite well, and because the Theocracy is who it is, he ends up joining the military. With the military experience that he begins to gain, aside from the fact that he is also a Saunter, then he begins running around leading some campaigns and actually does. And this is a interesting little tidbit here, right? So he has been on the field for a while, mostly in support roles at the beginning. So there's a spot in the book where we talk about a war that, oh, excuse me, we've actually already talked about it. The war where Condra's father dies. Klepp was present. He was not present on the battlefield per se, but he was present in the sense of like logistics roles kind of a thing, right? Which is interesting, but we'll dive more into that later. Klepp Lord Saunter. Anyways, Klepp's father, referred to as Lord Saunter at this time, has always been fond of Klepp. Klepp is a single child. He's got a mom, he's got a dad, and has lived that interesting single child life. So if you're a single child, you probably understand what this is. And as he's been running through, he's taken the time to really relate to the, Theocracy citizen. And the Theocracy citizenry love him because of that. He's always been found just kind of roaming around towns, around the main capital city. And as he's gotten older, right, and he's actually assumed his own command, we talk more about that in the book, so I won't spoil that too hard for you. This is really hard because I've got all my notes on Klepp in front of me, and I'm doing my best not to spoil stuff that gets brought up in the book, anyways, right? But he goes and he's been exploring the Middle Kingdom, or not the Middle Kingdom, the Theocracy as a whole. And eventually he decides to go and explore the Middle Kingdom. Hence why I said the Middle Kingdom a little bit ago. And that is going to be where his story picks up in the book. We kind of begin to find out that, he's there. He's doing some exploring, figuring out stuff. Obviously, he meets the princess. This is going to be a little bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want this spoiled, you might have to skip ahead. I'll do my best to put in like a chapter mark that lets you know if you need to skip ahead here and to where. But anyways, he goes, he meets the princess, and the spoiler is that obviously they kick it off. I'm a sucker for romance, and so Tales of Agmar has quite a few bits of romance in there. Kind of interesting because I really do love hardcore sci-fi, but I feel like you can never really tell a story about people, about humans, without there being love in there, because I feel like that's like a big defining factor of humanity is love, and that kind of no matter where you end up being, what you end up doing is like you're still tied down to love in some way, shape, or form, whether you find it or it finds you. And obviously, there's different kinds of love. I'm not just talking about like the guy likes a girl love. I'm talking about like family love. You got sibling love. You've got friendship, camaraderie, that kind of stuff, right? So that's going to come find you in life wherever you're at. And I feel like Tales of Agmar does a very good job having that happen to people who weren't expecting to find love in some places or to have love come find them, sort of a deal. And yeah, we'll see how much of that love ends up in happy places, though, because right at the end of the day, Tales of Agmar, the goal is to create a very good, very not, I wouldn't call it nitty gritty sci-fi fully. I would call it nitty gritty sci-fi with a spicy flavor of mystical fantasy or fantastical fantasy, however you want to word that, because all right, there's still going to be a happy ending kind of a thing. We'll see what that looks like. I'll do my best not to spoil everything, and what we think might be an ending to something might not always be the ending to that something. It could get better, it could get worse, and we're gonna really dive into that with Tales of Agmar. And yeah, so I'm gonna do my best to just leave Klepp now in that air of mystery, because you've got tons to explore with him inside of the arc that he's going to experience, especially in that first trilogy. Oh, geez, sorry. I just had a thought come to my head about a conversation I've been having with other people, just about the book and everything. So I'll break it down for you guys too, because I just had this conversation recently. But in short, I have broken down Tales of Agmar into big arcs, right? So it's got like the overarching arc, there's a little bit smaller arcs, and then there's like my book arcs. And my book arcs are all broken up into almost like if it was going to be a big book, it would be a 3-part long big book. But I didn't want to, one, take forever writing that book, two, have you guys just looking at like a massive, world, whatever sized volume of a book, because that's about what we would be looking at. Instead, I wanted them to be able to be taken in more, not quite an episodic format, but like a more cinematic format, right? So we've got time to explore everything, right? We've got time to reread or rewatch the book. In this case, obviously, it'd be rereading. That way, we can pick up all the little details that get left behind. We can keep searching for underlying stories, additional arcs, character development, etc., etc. And so it's gonna be super good. And yeah, I'm gonna do my best to leave it there and try not to spoil it for you. I'm so excited again for you guys to all be able to come in and read the book. Editing it has been a blast thus far, and I know it'll be a blast moving forward. So I will do my best to finish that in a timely manner for y'all so that you can start reading it and get excited as I am. And yeah, thanks so much for listening to the end, guys. Keep listening to support the show. If you've been listening to some episodes, you probably noticed that we've got a little bit of ads playing at the end of the show. I like to be more transparent about what's going on. And yes, I did put those there. And that is just going to help offset the cost of producing this show, right? That's the big idea right now. Is just it's going to help offset costs of production. But I will see you guys next week with an episode about the Gearblade's weapon of choice and their namesake, the Gearblade. Thankfully, with this, I will not have to leave the Gearblade in tons of mystery. We're just going to dive in there, get all these little details, all the cool ideas, kind of where I started out with the Gearblade with as like a weapon itself, and what that was going to look like in that D&D campaign that I mentioned this all was originally going to be before it exploded into something much more than that. But until then, this has been Sinjin with Tales of Agmar, and wherever you are, be a good one.